Hey, 101. It's my buddy Sam. Say hi, Sam. Sam's not much of a talker. You know, things are getting weird out there. Yeah, people are making apocalypse jokes like there's no tomorrow. Think about it, you get it. Sam's impressed. This week, we got to look at moving forward with your arguments of observation. So I thought it would be helpful to take a couple of moments and actually talk about Delastrate's argument of observation so that you can kind of see, well, what does this mean for me? Some of you may be so socially interested, and others of you might be more traditional minded about your subject. We'll take a look at them together through Delastrate and then kind of look at what you have for this 101. Here you are in week 15. You can see your two assignments. This one due before this one. This one a little more straightforward than this one. But we're going to look at this one first in sort of a roundabout way because it's the most important. It is the next and last essay that you have to write. Though it's not an essay yet, we're working towards it. So let's make sure we know what it is, right? The best example that you have of an argument from observation is Delastrate. Delastrate's Commercializing the Counterculture, How the Summer Music Festival Went Mainstream. Notice something sexy, something smart. Something sexy, something smart. I push this on you not because it's some weird habit that I have, but because this is a departmentally universal sort of feature of academic writing. Get used to it. Begin using it. It will help. Take a look at Delastrate's article for the sources that Delastrate uses, and you begin to see what an argument from observation actually is. The first of these sources is sort of a general context. They pick a specific festival, what the festival, and compare it to the more well-known ones that you and I both recognize, right? Then the very first source that we get is a quoted source, right? There's no blank quote in here. There's actually an attribution and a person, a writer from Oregon, who has comments in some form or fashion on the industry, right? Then we've actually got a book source, Music, Power, and Politics. We've also got an attribution, who the author is. We've even got a further attribution as to why we care, right? Great use of a source. Then we've got a sort of generalized source or a item. They looked up the movement Wandervogel, or migratory bird, and how that sort of influenced other generalized movements like beatniks and then the hippies which follow after. Then you've got another source, a 1967 issue of Time magazine. Those of you that did ads, that's similar to your sort of source that you have now, right? Here's an ad from Time magazine. They've got 1969, Charles Manson and the story of the Manson family as a source. They've got a little bit of research. Delastrate's got research into the Burning Man as a source. It's an example of what they're talking about. Another source that they're using is David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest. And though it's only used to make one single point about how these things are sort of commodified and then mediated by advertising and branding, it is a source. Glastonbury Festival becomes a source. Lightning in a Bottle becomes a source. Again, you should look at these on the internet. There's interesting ones. And then he relies on some, again, longer New York Times columnist David Brooks. Oh, look at that. Something sexy, something smart. I'm telling you, I'm not making this up. The definition of hipster, right? Here's another source, right? And if you scroll down to the end, you've got your final source, an episode of the Jimmy Kimmel Show. Then you've got a flashback to another Time article. And another example of the Countercultural Festival in Utrecht, right? So an argument from observation differs from an scholarly argument in that an argument from observation is more likely to lean on a vast variety of sources of all walks of life, like the Jimmy Kimmel Show and perhaps the musicologist book, all the way to particular examples of said subject, right? It's an argument from observation. It is not one that is built on vetted scholarly data, but rather more like an opinion editorial that has some informed critique about it. To do that, you have to be sure that your sources say what you want them to in the way that you want them to. So your assignment for this week is to do an annotated bibliography. That's this. Your sources can literally be anything, right? You need a total of 4. You might have one already. That source would be your rhetorical analysis. The other 3 are entirely of your making. As you looked at Delestrates, you could have a wide variety of things, right? So your sources are not limited to, but could include the following types: book, website, blog, social media conversation, popular press and trade publications. These would be like magazine and newspaper articles, online or in print. Additionally, you can consider documentary films, works of literature, poems, films, newscasts, and news reports. Now, the trick is what to do with it. To help, I've given you on under pages an example of annotated bibliographies. Essentially, an annotated bibliography covers 3 things. It summarizes your source, usually in 2 to 3 sentences. It assesses what you might use it for in comparison to your other sources, or how it will work in your argument. When do you think you might drop this in and for what? And a little bit of reflection on your part. How helpful will this be? What do you need to remember about it? If it has a bias, how do you sort of couch that in your own argument, right? These are generalized areas. These do not have to be 3 separate paragraphs. All annotated bibs vary from professor to professor, and that's exactly what the Purdue OWL here tells you. You should get as much information from your professor as you can, and I've given you plenty. We'll look at it again in a second. It's all right here. But in general, yours should look like this. Here is the book, source, MLA citation, then the annotation or the summary, reflection, reaction, right? All that is here. Now they've got it in 3 separate paragraphs. I don't want you to do that much with each source. You've got 4 sources. Ideally, you would like 4 hefty paragraphs. This would be a little thin as if it contained all 3 of those. But this plus another 3 or 4 sentences would probably be sufficient, right? The idea here is to be precise and concise, right? That's a learning tool that's good across most disciplines and most useful traits. Beyond just writing an annotated bib for an English 101 class, how to condense and concise and get the crux and true nature of what it is that you want in a small amount of space for people who don't have time when the actual thing itself is quite a bit larger. Right? I can think of a bunch of professions where that would be useful. So, what actually goes in yours? You'll put the MLA citation up first so that it looks like this. Then you continue your annotation underneath it. What does your annotation need for your professor? I'm glad you asked. Here's what you need, right? Essentially 2 parts: a description, summary of the source and its contents, including telling quotations or statistics which are of prime importance. Consider our work this semester in summarizing. Keep this short, right? 4 sentences at the most, maybe 5. An argument about the source's usefulness, possible biases, and credibility. This is in a logical manner. Do this in a logical manner so that it does not read as a checklist, right? This might take a little bit more, probably 5 or 6 sentences, right? So now you're at a total of 10 to 12 sentences in the neighborhood, right? That's it. Done. Move on to the next source, right? The actual paper for the argument of observation, I've included the description underneath so that you can see what you're working for. This part here is what will be due next. All that you owe for this week is this stuff here. Okay, let's take a with back to week 15. Now you know what you need, right? You're going to have 4 sources in alphabetical order by citation. Citation first, then annotation, right? And you know what you need for the annotation. I've included again the argument from observation assignment description with this, just so you can see what you're working towards, right? You want to do something sort of like Delestrati, but perhaps in your topic or area of expertise or interest, right? So it could be nursing, could be environmental science, could be who knows what, But this, right, and this, let's take a look at this now. They Say, I Say chapter 9 is probably one of the more important chapters in the entire book for this reason alone. One of the major contributions to the success or failure of student writing at the university is that of the academic voice, right? So my tip above all else is academic writing doesn't mean setting aside your own voice. Oftentimes, the more times we try to sound elevated and I'm having trouble even looking for those sorts of words, it doesn't come across in the way that we want it. Rather, it comes across as jumbled and, as I noted, obtuse, which means difficult and intransparent, can't be understood. So don't do that. Instead, read chapter 9 and then work your way through these 5 different little questions and exercises. You can keep them separate in your responses. They're worth, 2 points apiece for a total of 10, right? And it's due the 23rd, and you have until the 24th if you're going to turn it in late. And if you're not going to turn it in all, turn it in after that. No, really, turn it in by the 23rd. To do this, though, you need one of your sources that you're going to be using in your argument from observation, as well as your little source annotations. So, take that into consideration as well, right? Kind of double up some efforts, begin finding some sources, thinking about sources so that you have one to use when you engage with chapter 9 here, which is worth your time, and you should. Plus, you have to. It's for class. Okay. Okay, 101, that's it. Now you've seen what you needed for week 15. Hopefully you don't have many questions, but if there's going to be a week where you do, this will be the one. Particularly with what counts as a source for an argument from observation. Am I doing this right with the annotated sources? So more than any other, this might be a week where it would be advantageous to meet as a Zoom. Perhaps I think what we'll do is set up a large Zoom chat and just leave it available open. If you want to jump in and ask your questions, you can. Or you can always email me. We can set up a private Zoom chat, and then that way handle your question in particular as much time as it takes until you feel comfortable. Please don't hesitate to reach out for those. Okay? Be diligently working towards your argument for observation, thinking about how you're going to use these sources, what it is that you want to say, and come up with that title, man. Something sexy, something smart, right? Get used to it. All right. Take it easy, ever onward. Oh yeah, thought you were getting away, right? Oh no. A steak pun is a medium well done. Think about it. See you next week.